Most people live on the surface. They sail through life with borrowed maps, memorized answers, and a carefully curated sense of certainty. But then there are others, the ones who don't just skim the surface. They dive, quietly, relentlessly. Not because they want to be different, but because something within them refuses to settle for shallow waters. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've always felt that strange pull towards something deeper, something beneath the noise. Have you ever sat in a room full of people and felt like you were on a different frequency? Like your thoughts were both a gift and a burden, isolating you, yet awakening you all the same? Carl Jung spoke of this inner journey, the process of individuation. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. And wholeness isn't found in external validation or social applause. It's carved from silence, shaped in shadow, and tested in solitude. It's the moment you stop chasing who the world told you to be and begin the descent into who you already are. It's when you start asking the questions no one else dares to ask, not because you want to rebel, but because you can't pretend not to care. Being a deep thinker isn't a choice, it's a calling. A fire that doesn't burn out, only burns inward. It wakes you at night with questions that have no clear answers. It walks beside you, even in moments of joy, whispering, "What does this really mean?" And while the world moves fast, loud, and certain, you move slow, quiet, and aware. Because you've learned that depth doesn't shout, it echoes. And those echoes, if you follow them, will lead you not to others, but to yourself. This is not a story for the masses, this is for the few, the rare, the ones who live below the surface and see what others look away from. If you've ever felt that your thoughts make you an outsider, know this: you are not alone, you are simply deep, and the deeper you go, the closer you come to something real, something eternal. This is not weakness, it's your edge, and it's time you owned it. You've always felt it, the itch in your mind when something doesn't sit right. A phrase everyone repeats without thinking, a belief system followed blindly, a rule accepted simply because it's always been there. And yet, you question. Not out of arrogance, not to be difficult, but because your mind doesn't allow you to settle for prepackaged truths. You need to understand. You need to feel the truth in your bones before you let it guide your life. And that alone sets you apart. In a world that rewards compliance, deep thinkers are often seen as inconvenient. You ask, why? When silence would be easier, you hesitate where others rush. You challenge what's been handed down, not to disrespect tradition, but to test its weight before carrying it forward. This makes people uncomfortable. It threatens the safety of the collective unconscious, the shared beliefs we all inherit without ever choosing. Jung said that those who awaken must wrestle with the parts of the self that society would rather ignore. That's what you're doing. Every time you look deeper, question more, doubt what's popular or trending, you're not being difficult, you're being awake. But being awake has its cost. You may feel misunderstood, too intense, too serious. You might find that people pull away when you dig beneath their words, when you reflect their contradictions back to them. You become the mirror they didn't ask for but maybe needed. And sometimes, even you wish you could turn it off, just blend in, just agree. But you can't. Because something inside you refuses to play along with illusions, no matter how comfortable they might be. This isn't rebellion, it's discernment. You're not trying to destroy what others believe. You're just not willing to betray your own mind in the process of fitting in. And yes, it's lonely at times. But it's also liberating. Because when you question what others accept, you start building a truth that's yours, not inherited, not imposed, but earned. That's where authenticity begins. Not in answers, but in the courage to ask better questions. And you, whether you've realized it or not, have been doing that all along. For most people, silence is something to fill, an awkward space between words, a void to cover with noise, small talk, or distraction. But for you, silence is different. Silence speaks. It's not absence, it's presence. It's a kind of sacred space where thoughts rise like steam from still water, where the world quiets just enough for you to hear what's been there all along. Silence, to you, is not empty. It's honest. You've felt it before. That moment when you're alone, no music, no messages, no voices, just you, and something shifts. The weight of the world lifts ever so slightly, and suddenly you're in conversation with a deeper part of yourself. Not in words, but in knowing. Not in logic, but in presence. Carl Jung called this the inner dialogue, a form of self-reflection where your conscious mind meets the unconscious, not to judge, but to listen. While others run from stillness, you seek it, not because you're antisocial, not because you're cold, but because solitude is where your mind exhales. It's where you make sense of things, your past, your emotions, the tangled knots no one else seems to notice. People mistake your quiet for retreat, but it's not retreat, it's return. A return to yourself, to clarity, to sanity. Solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is the ache of not being understood. Solitude is the peace of understanding yourself. And when you sit in it long enough, you begin to realize how rare that understanding is. You hear your own contradictions, your pain, your dreams. You don't flinch from them. You make space. And in that space, a subtle transformation takes place, not loud, not visible, but real. Silence reveals what noise hides. And you, whether you intended to or not, have become someone who can sit with it, not just endure it, but learn from it. Most avoid this depth because it shows them who they really are. But you go there willingly, because you've learned that no external voice can replace the truth that rises from within. You don't just tolerate silence, you trust it. And that, in a world addicted to distraction, is nothing short of revolutionary. There's something you've always done, even when you didn't have the words for it. You see beyond what's obvious. You connect things most people overlook. A comment here, a glance there, a shift in tone, a recurring dream. While others live in straight lines, your mind moves like a web, interwoven, intricate, endlessly expanding. You don't just see events, you see meaning, patterns, echoes, truths buried beneath appearances. This isn't about being analytical. It's deeper than logic. It's intuitive intelligence. You feel when something is off before it can be explained. You notice synchronicities that seem too aligned to be accidents. To others, it might look like overthinking, but to you, it's all connected. Carl Jung called this the symbolic language of the unconscious way the soul communicates through signs, dreams, and archetypes. And somehow, you're fluent in it. You don't always have proof for what you sense, but you trust it. A subtle shift in someone's energy, a repeated theme in your life, a strange image that lingers in your mind. These aren't just coincidences to you. They're messages, mirrors, clues from the deeper currents of reality, and while others dismiss them, you collect them like sacred breadcrumbs, knowing they'll lead somewhere real. This way of thinking can be isolating. It's not easy to explain to someone why a dream disturbed you or why a fleeting intuition made you change direction. It's even harder when they ask for evidence you can't offer. But deep down, you know this is not fantasy. It's perception turned inward. It's the mind unshackled from linear thought. It's the soul recognizing its own language. You're not imagining connections where none exist. You're seeing the architecture of meaning, the invisible framework that most eyes have forgotten how to see. And while others walk through life focused only on what's in front of them, you see the ripples, the shadows, the unseen threads pulling everything together. That can be exhausting. It can feel like too much. But it's also your gift. To see patterns is to see truth before it becomes visible. And in a world that's forgotten how to listen to itself, you are a rare reminder that not all wisdom is taught, some of it is remembered. And you, somehow, have always remembered. You nod, you smile, you say all the right things, but inside, something is wilting, not because you dislike people, not because you're antisocial, but because surface drains you. The weather, the weekend, the polite but empty exchanges, they skim across your mind like pebbles across a lake, never once touching the bottom, and that's where you live, in the depths. You've tried to play along, to laugh at the small jokes, to match the tone, to blend in, but each time it leaves you tired in a way that sleep can't fix. Because while others thrive in light banter, you crave something else presence, meaning a conversation that cracks open the soul just a little. That moment when someone says, "I've never told this to anyone before," and the air shifts, that's what feeds you. Carl Jung understood this divide. He called it the personae social mask we all wear to survive. But you've never been good at wearing masks. Or maybe you wore one for too long and it started to suffocate you. Either way, you sense when others are speaking from behind a facade, and it leaves you yearning for something real. You want truth, even if it's uncomfortable. Vulnerability, even if it's messy. You'd rather sit in silence with someone who feels than laugh for hours with someone who doesn't. To others, you may seem intense, too serious, too much. But it's not that you're too much, it's that you feel too much to pretend otherwise. You weren't built for small talk. You were built for soul talk, for the kind of exchange that leaves you both a little more human, a little more seen. And so you choose your words carefully. You listen more than you speak. And when you do speak, you reach for something beneath the surface, not to impress, but to connect. And yes, it means fewer conversations, but also truer ones. Because you know something many don't. Real connection doesn't require many words, just honest ones. And for you, that's the only kind worth having. You live in a strange relationship with time. Hours pass, but you barely notice. A 5-minute walk becomes a journey through memory. A question turns into a spiral of reflection that stretches far beyond the moment. Others watch the clock. You disappear into something else. A realm not measured in minutes, but in meaning. To the outside world, you seem distracted, lost in thought, late maybe, but in truth, you're not lost, you're elsewhere. Absorbed, immersed. You don't experience time like others do. Not as a series of ticking seconds, but as a fluid, expanding field. This is what philosophers call chiropsychological time, time felt, not counted. Jung spoke of this too, the difference between outer time, which governs society, and inner time, which governs the soul. And your soul doesn't wear a watch. This way of being is both a blessing and a burden. You can spend hours inside a single idea, turning it over like a stone in your hand. You lose track of the day, but remember how something felt where the light fell, what stirred in you, what was left unsaid. People ask where your mind goes, but even if you told them, they wouldn't understand, because while they're crossing things off lists, you're charting maps in realms they don't see. You don't rush because meaning can't be rushed. You don't multitask well because your mind isn't built for fragmentation. You move through life like a deep river, slow on the surface but surging underneath. Others live in moments that feel the same. You live in moments that stretch. Some days pass like seconds. Some seconds feel like days. That's the paradox of depth. It warps the clock. And yet, this is your gift. You pause. You notice. You sit in things longer than most could bear. And in doing so, you extract truths they'll never find in speed. Your calendar may be full, but it's the unscheduled moments that shape you, the ones no one else sees. So don't apologize for your pace. Don't try to sync yourself to a world that's racing nowhere. Because time, for you, is not a deadline. It's a dimension. And you, whether you realize it or not, were never meant to keep up. You were meant to go deep. Most people dodge their emotions like pothole swerving, distracting, pretending, but not you. You don't flinch at sadness. You don't retreat from discomfort. If anything, you lean in. You mine it. You sit with feelings others rush to bury, not because you enjoy the pain, but because you know that beneath it, there is always something true. And truth, no matter how dark, is sacred to you. You felt the heaviness of grief, the sharp sting of disappointment, the quiet ache of loneliness not as enemies, but as teachers. While others numb, you listen. While they suppress, you explore. And yes, it hurts. It can be overwhelming. It can make the world feel too loud, too raw, too much, but you understand something most don't. The only way out is through. Carl Jung once said, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And you've made darkness conscious more than once. You've stared it down and asked, "What are you here to teach me?" That takes courage, the kind not everyone understands, because facing your own shadows means letting go of illusions. It means meeting the parts of yourself that don't smile for the camera. But it also means transformation, because in that pain, in that fire, something alchemical happens. You begin to shed what isn't yours. You begin to grow not in spite of the emotion, but through it. You've discovered that anger, when acknowledged, becomes boundary. That sorrow, when accepted, becomes wisdom. That fear, when held gently, becomes fuel. You don't drown in emotions. You dive beneath them and come up with pearls. You feel things deeply. That's not a flaw, it's your depth manifesting through your heart. You carry storms inside you, but you've also learned how to find calm in their center. And while the world might label you as too emotional or overly sensitive, the truth is you are emotionally awake. And in a world that numbs itself to sleep, your intensity is not a weakness, it's a gift. You don't just live, you wonder why you live, why any of us do, why we're here, what it all means. And those aren't just passing curiosities for you, they're obsessions. Not the kind that keep you up anxiously at night, but the kind that keep you searching, the kind that whisper behind every experience, every relationship, every moment of stillness, is there more? While others move from task to task, you drift between thoughts, big ones. You ask things most people never say aloud. What is real? What happens after this? Why does beauty matter? Is there such a thing as fate, or do we write it ourselves? These aren't distractions to you, they're doorways. And once one opens, you walk through it fully, not because you expect an answer, but because you need to look. Carl Jung believed that the search for meaning was essential to the human journey. He saw it as the core of individuation, that long, winding path of becoming who we really are. He knew that meaning isn't handed to us. It's unearthed, forged, chosen, and for people like you, that journey never stops. Even when life is fine, something in you keeps digging, keeps listening for what lies beneath the surface. This obsession with meaning isn't easy. It means you often feel more, wonder more, struggle more. You live in that strange space between awe and anguish where the world feels both unbearably beautiful and painfully fragile. And in that tension you grow. In that tension you become. Because even if the questions don't always bring clarity, they bring something even more powerful: depth. Others may tell you to lighten up, to stop thinking so much, but you can't. Because for you, meaning isn't optional, it's oxygen. Without it, everything feels flat, hollow, mechanical. You don't need everything to make perfect sense. You just need it to matter. You don't need easy answers. You just need to know the questions were worth asking. And that's what makes you different. That's what makes you deep. You're not afraid of complexity. You seek it. And in doing so, you become something rare in this world, not just a thinker, but a searcher. And that search, even when it hurts, is your path home. There's a quiet ache that lives inside you, not loud enough to break you, but ever present. The sense that you don't quite belong, that you move through the world like a foreigner in your own culture. You watch people gather around common ground, shared opinions, shared distractions, shared roles, and you try, sometimes, to stand among them. But something in you holds back, not out of pride, but out of truth. You've tasted what it feels like to betray yourself in the name of belonging, and it left you hollow. So now, even when the loneliness creeps in, even when it hurts to be on the outside, you still choose to remain there. Because the price of admission into most circles is too steep. It costs your voice, your vision, your soul. Carl Jung spoke often of this path. The journey of individuation, of becoming your truest self, doesn't lead you toward the crowd. It leads you away from it, not out of isolation, but out of integrity. Because true belonging doesn't mean blending in, it means being seen. And for people like you, who live from a deeper place, that kind of recognition is rare. Sometimes you question yourself. You wonder if maybe you're the problem, if you should speak less, feel less, ask less. But every time you try to shrink to fit, something in you fractures. You know what that fracture feels like. You've worn masks before, and you remember how they suffocated you. So now, you choose something harder but more honest, standing alone rather than standing in disguise. You don't need the world to understand you. You just need to stop pretending you're someone you're not. And while that path is lonelier, it's also clearer. Because you're no longer chasing acceptance, you're anchoring in authenticity. And in a world built on sameness, your difference is not your burden, it's your mirror. It's the proof that you've chosen truth over imitation. And even when no one claps for that choice, you know it's the one that sets you free. While most people treat dreams like disposable fragments, strange images, quickly forgotten, you know better. You've felt their weight, you've sensed their messages. You've woken up not just remembering a dream, but carrying it, as if it left a mark deeper than sleep should allow. For you, dreams are not just nighttime illusions, they're communications, symbols, mirrors held up by the unconscious, asking you to look closer. You don't dismiss them because they don't make logical sense. You know their logic runs deeper beneath language, beneath narrative. Carl Jung dedicated much of his work to this very idea, that dreams are how the unconscious speaks to us in code, not with facts, but with archetypes, those timeless images that rise from something older than memory. A river, a child, a storm, a door. You've seen them, and you've felt their meaning even before you could name it. Your relationship with dreaming isn't passive, it's participatory. You reflect. You ask. You write things down not because someone told you to, but because you know those images won't stay unless you make space for them. And sometimes they guide you quietly, indirectly, a shift in direction, a sense of clarity, a nudge toward healing. Other times they confront you. They show you what you haven't wanted to face, the shadow, the wound, the version of yourself you've been avoiding. And while that can be unsettling, you welcome it. Because even in sleep, you're still becoming. People might laugh at how seriously you take dreams. Let them. They don't understand that the mind doesn't sleep just because the body does. Your thoughts, your fears, your truths, they keep working, keep speaking, keep reaching for you. And you, unlike most, are listening. There's something mystical about that, something ancient. You're not just remembering dreams, you're meeting yourself inside them. And every time you do, you return a little different, a little deeper. Because for you, dreaming isn't just rest, it's revelation. And even in the quiet hours of the night, you're still doing what you were born to do. Searching, listening, and slowly, piece by piece, coming home to who you are. You sit in rooms where laughter rings out, where people talk about shows, scandals, trending posts, and something in you starts to drift. Not because you're above it, but because it simply doesn't touch you. You try to engage, you smile, maybe even offer a polite comment. But inside, it feels like eating air, empty, hollow, flavorless. Shallow distractions don't feed you, they numb you. Gossip tastes bitter. Trends feel loud and temporary. Superficial media may flash in bright colors, but your mind is looking for substance, not spectacle. You crave something richer, conversations that challenge, ideas that stir, beauty that moves something ancient inside you. For you, entertainment isn't escape, it's a search for resonance. And so you turn elsewhere, to art that makes you pause, to music that opens a memory, to philosophy that twists your thinking in the best possible way, to spiritual texts that feel older than the earth itself, to psychology, where the architecture of the human soul begins to make a strange kind of sense. These are not hobbies, they are lifelines. They remind you that not everything has to be fast, flashy, or filtered. That depth is still possible even now. Carl Jung understood this hunger. He spoke of intellectual nourishment, the kind of knowledge that feeds not just the mind, but the psyche. He believed that the unconscious craves symbols, stories, and ideas that help us grow. And you've felt that craving. You know what it means to feel starved in a room full of noise. It's not that you reject joy. It's that your joy comes from depth, from truth, from content that awakens, not just distracts. And yes, that makes you different, sometimes even lonely. But you've stopped trying to pretend you're satisfied with crumbs when your soul is asking for substance. You're not difficult to entertain. You just need something real, something textured, something that doesn't insult your mind but invites it. And when you find it, when that book, that film, that conversation hits the right note, you don't just feel entertained, you feel seen, and that, to you, is worth more than anything trending ever could be. There's a place you go that no one else can follow. It's not a location, it's a dimension. Inside your mind, inside your soul, there exists a world more vivid, more honest, more alive than the one outside your window. While others find reality in headlines, deadlines, and conversations, you find it in thought, in images, in the quiet unfolding of inner landscapes that feel more like home than any physical place ever could. You've always lived this way, drifting into imagination as a child, building stories in your mind, asking questions no one else seemed to be asking, and as you grew older, that inner world didn't vanish. It deepened. Now, it holds your visions, your reflections, your dreams, your dilemmas. You carry whole universes within you, and even when the outer world gets loud, you know how to retreat to that sacred, invisible space. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." You've lived that quote without even realizing it. You know that awakening doesn't come from achieving or performing, it comes from remembering, from recognizing yourself in the shadows of your thoughts and the quiet corners of your being. That's where truth lives. Not on stages or screens, but inside the space where no one's watching. And because your inner world is so rich, the outer world often feels muted, not meaningless, but muffled. You walk through days performing tasks, engaging in conversations, going through the motions, all while something deeper is happening just beneath the surface. An insight, a realization, a story writing itself without ink. This doesn't make you disconnected, it makes you tuned to a different frequency. Others may see you as distant or distracted, but the truth is, you're engaged, just not always in what they're engaging with. You're not avoiding the world, you're interpreting it through your inner lens. And that lens, shaped by thought, soul, and silence, reveals layers others don't even know exist. So, when the world feels too shallow, too noisy, too chaotic, don't force yourself to stay on the surface. Go inward. That's where you've always found the clearest view, the richest meaning, and the deepest version of who you really are. There's a part of you that others don't see, not because it's hidden behind walls, but because it exists in places most never dare to look. It's not polished, it doesn't perform. It holds your fears, your guilt, your anger, your wounds, the parts of yourself you were told to suppress, the impulses that made you feel ashamed, the questions that threatened the comfort of those around you. This is your shadow. Carl Jung believed that unless we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives and we'll call it fate. He wasn't talking about superstition. He was talking about the quiet sabotage we create when we deny who we really are, the resentment that leaks out in sarcasm, the fear that dresses itself as control, the pain that repeats in relationship after relationship. And deep thinkers like you don't just study the shadow, you meet it. That meeting isn't elegant, it's not poetic, it's raw, ugly, terrifying, even. Because facing your shadow isn't a mental exercise, it's an emotional excavation. It's sitting with your shame until you understand where it came from. It's tracing your rage back to the moment you weren't protected. It's realizing that your perfectionism isn't a virtue, it's a defense. But you do it, or at least you're willing to, because you'd rather see the truth than live a lie. You'd rather confront the beast than pretend it's not lurking. You know the cost of avoiding yourself is far greater than the cost of transformation, and that makes you rare. This journey isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with applause or affirmation, but it comes with freedom, real freedom. Because once you face the parts of yourself you were once afraid of, they lose their power. You don't have to hide. You don't have to fake it. You simply begin to integrate, to live from wholeness, not fragmentation. So no, you're not just deep because you think deeply. You're deep because you've dared to face the parts of yourself most people spend their whole lives avoiding. And every time you do, you come back changed. Not perfect, but more real than before. And that, in this world, is one of the bravest things a person can be. There's a misconception about deep thinkers that they live in their heads, detached from the world, all theory and no motion. But that's not you. Yes, your mind is expansive. Yes, you think things through. But when you move, you do it with purpose. You don't act for the sake of movement. You act when something aligns, when the thought becomes truth, and truth becomes action. You don't react impulsively, but that doesn't mean you're passive. You pause, you assess, you ask the deeper questions. What does this choice reflect about me? Am I moving from fear or from truth? And once you have your answer, you act in a way that resonates not just with the situation, but with your values. That kind of intention is rare. Carl Jung believed that true psychological insight doesn't end in awareness, it demands integration. What we understand must change how we live, or it becomes self-deception dressed as intellect. You know this. That's why your insights don't just sit in journals, they show up in your relationships, in your boundaries, in the way you speak, the way you forgive, the way you walk away when necessary. You've probably been told you overthink. Maybe you've even believed it. But what they call overthinking is often just depth without permission. They don't see the clarity you're chasing beneath the noise. They don't see how your questions are shaping decisions they couldn't begin to understand, because to them, quickness equals confidence, but to you, clarity is what matters. Your thinking is not a loop, it's a funnel. It narrows into insight, direction, action. When you commit to something, it's not by accident. It's because you've turned it over 100 ways, and every part of you said yes. And when you walk away, it's not from indecision, it's from truth that no longer fits. So no, you're not paralyzed by thought, you're empowered by it. And that's the difference. You don't just observe life, you respond to it with awareness. And in a world full of noise, that kind of grounded action doesn't make you slower, it makes you unshakable. Most people are trained to see in fragments, good versus bad, success versus failure, light versus dark. They live in category sorting life into tidy compartments where things make sense but never really mean anything. You, on the other hand, were never satisfied with halves. You were never content with black or white answers. You saw complexity and chose to stay with it. Deep thinkers don't just analyze, they integrate. You've always sensed that life isn't linear, that emotions can contradict each other, that beauty and pain can share the same breath. You see the patterns, but also the paradoxes. You don't resolve them with quick conclusions. You hold them, let them speak, and over time they form something richer than clarity, something true. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. His work was never about perfection, it was about wholeness. He believed the self could only be realized by bringing together the conscious and unconscious, the persona and the shadow, the light and the dark. Not choosing one over the other, but honoring both. That's what you do, often without even realizing it. You gather all the pieces, wounds, insights, contradictions, and you try to make something whole. It's not easy. This way of seeing means you often carry more, feel more, sense what others ignore. But it also means you can hold space for people in a way that heals. You see their masks and their wounds beneath them. You hear what they're saying and what they're really trying to say. You live in the in-betweens, the places most people skip over. And in those places, you've learned to connect dots others didn't know existed. You don't seek to be right, you seek to understand. And understanding requires seeing the whole, the story behind the judgment, the history beneath the fear, the humanity even in the mistakes. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you rare. Because where others divide and define, you weave. And in your quiet way, you bring the fractured pieces of the world a little closer together. Being a deep thinker is not always a blessing. Let's be honest, sometimes it feels like a weight. You notice too much, feel too much. You sit with questions no one else is asking. You carry truths most people would rather ignore. And at times it makes you feel alone, like you're built for a world that doesn't always know what to do with you. But what if that's not a flaw? What if that's your power? Because yes, depth can be a burden, but it's also a gift, a sacred lens that sees beauty in pain, meaning in confusion, silence in chaos. You weren't meant to skim the surface. You were meant to DeVito explore the hidden layers of existence, of emotion, of soul, and that calling, though heavy, is holy. You may not always find others who speak your language, but when you do, there's a recognition, a softening, a sense that maybe you're not strange, you're just awake. And if you've seen yourself in these words, in these signs, let this be your confirmation. You are not broken, you are not too much, you are not overthinking. You are deep, and this world needs your depth more than ever. Because while others look away, you stay. While others dismiss, you inquire. While others forget, you remember. You carry wisdom not just from books, but from silence, from suffering, from staring into the mirror when it was the last thing you wanted to do. That makes you strong, not in the loud way, but in the unshakable, quiet way of someone who knows who they are becoming. So don't dim that light to make others comfortable. Don't trade your questions for quick answers just to fit in. And don't let anyone convince you that your depth is a problem to fix. Because the world doesn't just need thinkers. It needs souls who dare to go deep. And that is exactly who you are. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.